Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Brad Henderson. Brad, thank you so much for being here today.
Aaron, thank you. It's a pleasure.
There's nothing better that gives an American joy than someone from Toronto venturing south to Florida, realizing that I guess now we can say it's being closer to the Gulf of America is better than being close to the America's northern border. But really, thank you so much for being here and thank you for taking the time. I say this in almost every single episode. Everybody should read the bio because it's very important. I don't want to read the whole thing. I'm going to focus on some aspects of what you do. But I'm going to work backwards in the line that I want to focus on. And your bio reads as follows: Brad's own early, isolated journey of leadership without guidance. That line has led you to what we're going to discuss further, but I'd like, if it's possible, I always try to go back to how people were raised and brought up and what impacted their hustle. But I think in your specific case, although I'd love to hear about that if you'd like to share it, really leadership and how someone defines their hustle is super lonely. And I think that what you're doing is great to try to end that. But inherently in the idea of being a leader is that, the top general has to be at the top. There can't be someone higher than the CEO, because if there was someone higher than the CEO, then they wouldn't be the CEO. But you've chosen to focus on how to work through that isolation or how to dive deeper into that isolation and make it feel just slightly less alone, even though people always want to get to that top. So I love if you could take us to that moment of your own early isolated journey of leadership and where you realized that you were without the guidance and realized the guidance that you needed.
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I started off in the corporate world and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And early on, I was given people to manage with no guidance, and just here they are, figure out what it is that you need to do, what they need to do, and go forth. And a lot of the times in that journey, as a leader, you're trying to figure out, well, what's the best thing to do? And maybe I was good at doing certain things, and so I would be just telling people what to do. Or worse is that if they got into challenges, I would jump in and do the job for them. And through that process, I learned that is absolutely the wrong way to lead people for a whole variety of different reasons. And the further up the corporate chain I got, the less guidance I got, because now you're dealing with situations where there's very few people in front of you. And many of the people that are in front of you or even beside you may feel that they're competing for the same roles that you want. And so their desire to help you is somewhat less. And any corporate policies, any corporate training that is going on inside of an organization is tied to that organization. And so comparatively early in my journey, I got caught up in some corporate politics. Constructive dismissal followed, and I ended up out on the street. And so not only did I not have an identity, I didn't have a telephone number, I didn't have the tech to support it. And I realized very quickly on that I didn't have the right mentors to help me in that journey. And that was really a significant moment in my career where I decided I needed people to help me in that journey.
There's so much to unpack there, but there's this moment, I think, more often than not, for budding leaders who were in your position where, as you said, they're out on the street, whether it was, you want to say it was constructive dismissal, some might argue in their moments, but there's that inherent regret that people who are chasing greatness and want to be leaders face in that moment. Like, what if I didn't push this harder or as hard, then I wouldn't be on the street. But if I wasn't on the street, but if I didn't, then I would have the regret of not chasing my dream or embracing my hustle or hustling as much as I can or as best as I can for myself, others, my family, my career, or my own drive. So there's that dichotomy where it's, I don't want to say you're doomed if you do, you're doomed if you don't, because I think the people who you work with or yourself in that moment ultimately come out better on the other end. If you stay true to yourself and true to your hustle, obviously acting morally, ethically appropriate, et cetera, and you end up on the street, most of the time, if you keep hustling, not to steal my own tagline, but if you keep hustling, it works out best on the other end. But there has to be that moment of, the average person who just got laid off because they might have pushed the envelope a little bit in their boss's mind or in the company's mind, and they're 32 years old, two kids with a mortgage and unemployed. So, and that I think is the loneliest moment because you're a leader or a budding leader without a flock, and you're unemployed. So, what'd you do next?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think the just to build on what you're saying, I pushed and ended up getting fired. Constructive dismissal, whatever you want to call it. I ended up getting fired. And I know that I had a significant portion of that role. And to me, the decision was I could either be true to myself and keep my job, true to myself and lose my job, or be someone different and keep my job. And ultimately, I took the be true to myself because I didn't want to have any lingering regrets going forward. And one of the things I love about a quote from Jack Welch is that he said, I would rather be fired for things I did than for things I didn't do. And so,
Keep hustling.
yeah, exactly. Your byline is absolutely perfect that way. And I don't regret, now looking back, many years ago, I don't regret the decisions that I made at that time. Had I known then what I know now, could I have played that situation differently? Absolutely, with the right guidance and with the right mentorship.
But who says that you would have ended up where you are today? Meaning, again, I don't think that anybody should burn down a building on their way out and develop a terrible reputation because they're constant conflict at an organization. But I'll give you an example that I always love to discuss. I think it has a lot to do with this, although less leadership based, and that is my father, he should rest in peace, was one of the founders and inventors of a protocol called timeout in the American medical system, specifically as it relates to surgery. And these timeout protocols, although seeming completely elementary and simple, ended up saving a bunch of lives. And the idea was that very often ancillary medical providers are and assistants and associates are afraid to challenge the leadership, i.e., the attending senior physician, because they feel that they will then damage their ego. Yet, it is possible because everybody is human, and we work very heavily in the medical professional liability, medical malpractice space, and insurance, that everybody is human and everybody makes errors. Well, if I have 10 people in an operating room who could help me not make an error, then maybe I should valuably use them. So we literally have, I wish I had one on my desk, I don't have one right now, these items that were bright colored, looked like pens and pencils and other little sticky notes that out of the patient's eye during surgery, when they were awake, or even if they were somewhat awake, anybody in the operating room could take the pen out of their pocket. It was bright orange, put it down on a table where the physician could see it, and all it said was timeout. And all that says is, we all need to take a moment to regroup. 30 seconds. Like, I think you're operating on the wrong leg. Or I think that this person might be allergic to the medicine you're about to give them. I'm not jumping on you. People are listening. The patient can hear all these things like that. And what we found was the hardest part of implementing that was the fear of the repercussions. Yet when the leaders realized that it was ultimately going to help them, they embraced that. And so if everybody who wants to be a leader or wants to grow would embrace the fact that respectfully and appropriately, they can challenge it, I have found that most leaders actually enjoy those employees. And by the way, parenthetically, if your boss or leader doesn't want to take your respectful, constructive criticism, then they probably don't want you to grow anyway, so you should probably find another job.
Totally true. It's a great metaphor. It's a great model for what leaders find when they get further up the chain because they find their information is much more filtered. It's much more shaped to what it is that the staff think you want to hear. And it can ultimately lead you to operating on the wrong leg. I mean, I think that's a great metaphor. And coaching and mentorship are ways that you can have a safe space where you can have someone whose interests are totally about you, help you work through those situations, expose your blind spots if there are any, help you to shape the message appropriately for your staff. And that's something that is if you engage with a professional coach, it's something that's universal and it's above your current situation. Because if your mentoring is all inside of your organization and you're fired the next day, that mentorship goes away with it.
100%. I want to, as I mentioned, everyone should read the bio, and I want to pivot a little bit. And we are also going to obviously link your book below. But I would like to focus on a couple of remarkable sentences that I'm going to put together from your bio. Referring to what led you to write your book or the thesis of your book, I want to just get your thoughts and deep dive into the following. He, referring to yourself, believes that leadership is too important to be left to chance. Within every leader lies an extraordinary capacity for impact, often waiting for the right catalyst. When leaders receive the mentorship, it continues, when leaders receive the mentorship they deserve, they create organizations that elevate people and unleash game changing results that reshape companies and legacies. And what I would add, with your permission, is for both themselves and the organizations that they're working in.
True, true.
Let's unpack that. Why is leadership too important to be left to chance? And why do leaders often underestimate the impact that they can have at a given stage in their career?
And there's a lot in that question. There's a
I know.
lot in that question. Let me start by saying that if you go back to the early part of my career, I studied business in university. Leadership was not anywhere on the agenda. So here are universities, and I say this with the highest amount of respect. Here are universities pumping out leader after leader, and they're teaching them, decision making theories and economic theory and accounting and every other thing that you can imagine. But leadership is not something that was given a lot of attention. So then you enter the corporation, and very few of the people that are ahead of you had any kind of education on leadership. And so their whole development around leadership was really based on chance and based on their personality and how they figured it out. And very few of them were good at sharing their experiences with the people underneath them. And so you have essentially people who had very little knowledge and experience, not experience, but education, teaching people who have got very little knowledge and experience in education. And it's just a completely random approach. And so you're entrusting these people as they ascend up the corporate ladder and are responsible for then developing and motivating increasing numbers of people to really a model that's based on, well, hopefully he or she will figure it out.
Do you believe that everyone can be a leader?
I believe that everyone can be a much better leader when given the proper amount of guidance. The difference between phenomenal leaders and great leaders and okay leaders has a lot to do with, I think, emotional intelligence as much as crystalline intelligence. And so I believe that with the right coaching and mentoring, everyone can be better than they are. Not everyone is cut out to be a leader of people.
Do you believe that everyone should want to be a leader?
I think everyone should see the impact that they have around people around them. And whether they're leading as a leader without influence, without authority, or they're leading, specifically as someone who is in a leadership role, you should be very knowledgeable about the impact that you're having. Because even people that are not leaders or they're not officially leaders can have an impact on the people around them, can have a mentorship relationship with the people around them, even though it's not official. But if you need to see yourself in that role to be able to step into that kind of capability.
I assumed you would say that, but the reason why I ask is that I think that a lot of people, two things happen. There are those who dream of being it's interesting because there are those who dream of being leaders who probably shouldn't be. And then there are those that get thrown into the lion's den of leadership, literally down the river without a paddle. And some people then excel naturally, but some people don't want it. I don't want to say fear it, but it's like it's almost unfair to the person who doesn't want to be thrown into that to force their hand, because a lot of people don't ask for it thrive and therefore they're the most successful. The God forbid the father passes away or the mother passes away and that oldest child has to jump into the leadership role. Some people will thrive in that, and that could be, by the way, in a professional setting also, but some people don't, not because they're bad people, but just because their DNA is just, it's not for them. And so I think that a lot of impactful leadership can be drawn out, or time can be not wasted if people actually had a rubric to focus on in that analysis. Meaning, when a company needs a temporary CEO, not everybody wants to be made the CEO when they're the temporary CEO, right? The interim CEO. Not everyone wants to be that. But if there was a way, or they were taught, or they were coached, or they were educated, then that decision could be made in the best possible way for the organization, for them individually. And it could end up being that they thought that they weren't going to be a great leader, and then they could be, or they realize, maybe my hunch was right about myself, for lack of a better term, and like, I'm happy where I am. Like, I don't really want to be this other person. But you can't do that until you're in this situation. So how does one deal with that in advance, for lack of a better term, within themselves?
I think it's a great question, and the reason why is that it really comes down to what are your beliefs about leadership. So, for example, with you, just humor me. What are your beliefs about leadership? What do you think a leader is, and how do you see yourself as a leader?
I think a leader is the person who gets the most output in the most efficient manner from those around them. Greatest example, or most common example, parents. It is every parent's goal to get their children to grow up and evolve into the best possible people that they could be. And if you do that, and you're the CEO of your home, or you're the best leader, then your children can become respectful, efficient, and achieve the most that they can in their lives. On the corporate level, it's about getting everybody to row in the same direction, contributing their piece. And then I guess the best leaders get to just put their feet up and eat popcorn and watch the movie.
Your answer, in my opinion, is a brilliant example of someone who sees leadership as a noble cause, as something noble to be pursued. And you wouldn't be doing your podcast if you didn't feel that you had something to share with a broader audience, and something to try and impact them, to positively influence them. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing. There are other people whose beliefs are that managing people is about telling them what to do. It's about catching people who are slacking off, and trying to figure out how to get them to do what they want. Or they look at it on the basis of, I don't want to manage people because they're too hard and it's too difficult. Their beliefs shape their reality, and their reality shapes how they come to that leadership conversation, and how they come to leadership in general. If you change their belief, you'll change their whole perspective on how they see things. And I'll just finish by saying this, that if that person has the belief that leadership is a noble cause, they will be much more open to the coaching and mentoring that will help them to be better in that noble cause.
And if I may add, the most ironic twist in that whole thing, and it's nice of you to call me noble, I appreciate that. But the ironic part is that those who lead others effectively end up seeing the greatest benefit to themselves. Meaning the bad leader, quote unquote, that you were describing, who's just looking at the gotcha to catch others, etc., will spend their life trying to catch others, and their life will be exponentially more difficult. But the best leaders, right, are the best coaches of sport are the ones who can impact the players, educate the players, inspire the players to perform in their role in the best possible way and the most efficient way. And then, by the way, just sit on the side and watch them win the championship, right? Now, obviously, everybody knows that the work went in before that in creating the team and creating that. But ultimately, that person ends up working less hard once they've developed that team than the person who's constantly having to babysit and double down. So the person who makes leadership less about themselves gets more output, and the person who works harder and makes it more about themselves gets less output. So they end up working harder when really, right? I think you would say that the most effective leader, the most effective organizations are those that, if the leader disappeared for a few days, obviously without any crisis striking, the facility's still operating. It's as if they weren't. It's as if they never left.
Absolutely.
And the CEO who can actually take a vacation because they've empowered and enabled and built the structure, and those who work with them appropriately, is so rare. And not worry, by the way, that production is going to go down, and not worry that they're going to come back and it's going to be a firestorm, and not worry that they have to shut down the facility when they want to take a vacation. So I think it's just what I love about what you're doing and the book, and the way you're trying to impact others, is that this is something that nobody thinks about until they, as I mentioned earlier, until they're forced to. And if people would just give a little bit of thought, it doesn't have to be daily. You might disagree, but I'm saying monthly, quarterly, or even annually, like, let's audit the leadership and the style, I think people's lives would be much better. Both the leader and the mentor and the mentee, right?
Totally. And one of the lines that I very much like is that you're not a great leader until your mentee develops their mentee and their mentee develops their mentee. And what that speaks to is the cascading effect that you have as a leader on not only helping the person that you're coaching and leading to develop themselves, but you instill in them the passion to develop people underneath them and to have the people underneath them keep developing. Because then you'll have the kind of organization that you mentioned earlier, which is a self sustaining organization that will continue to grow and continue to inspire future generations. And you're absolutely true that that leads to a situation where the CEO or each of the leaders in that chain can extricate themselves from the current situation. And yes, some of them may put their feet up and enjoy the good parts of life, but more likely they'll keep hustling and they'll look for what's the next mountain that the organization needs to climb, because the leaders that are still stuck on trying to figure out what everybody else is doing and prove to them that they can do it better are the leaders who are going to keep their organizations from thriving.
For sure. In America, we have this sport that's extremely popular. It's called basketball. I know that you'd rather me make some sort of like hockey reference, but that's more difficult for me. There is a great study that has been done on professional coaches and what is called the coaching tree. And arguably the two most successful coaches in the history of American basketball on the professional level was Greg Popovich, and on the college level was Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. And it's a great exercise that everyone should look at or take some time. It's publicly available data. There have been studies on it at looking at the impact that these two individuals have had on the people who were their assistants, and then they became head coaches, and then the people who were their assistants, and then they became coaches. And then you look at on the college level, hundreds and thousands of young adults in their more formative years. And then on the professional level, billions of dollars that were earned by players excelling in these systems developed by one person who obviously had a mentor above them. But in my generation, looking at that, and I think that if everybody was able to see later in life the impact that they could have, as you say, those game changing results will reshape themselves, their companies, and their legacies. But if everyone could then see 30 years from now, from 50,000 feet, all the little lives that were impacted, the company that expanded, and the person who mopped the floor, who was able to get their friend a job because the company doubled in size and there were more bathrooms to be cleaned at the end of the day, so on and so forth, right? That's an impact on another person and their family and their eating, and then them getting the medical care they need, and so on and so forth. But yet, as you said, the less productive leader is the one who focuses only on the narrow vision, and therefore I think they see the least success.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. I could talk to you for hours. I love this. And I think that I think people should read the book. I'm certainly going to. And I really appreciate you taking the time being here. I can't believe it's about, of the episodes we've done, and this episode will be close to 100. The time has really flown by on this one. I've had fun.
It's been my pleasure too, Aaron.
As you know, we end every episode by asking our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational, inspirational quote, what it means to them, what it means to their hustle, and how it has inspired them to keep hustling. So with that, I'm going to say once again, Brad Henderson, thank you for being here. Thank you for inspiring me, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, Aaron, my favorite quote is learn from other people's mistakes because you can't live long enough to make them all yourself. And if you're somebody who's got a passion for coaching, which I do, it's really a rally cry for others to be open to learning from other people's positive experiences as well as their mistakes. But it's a powerful quote because it really speaks to the fact that people all too often are off making the same mistakes. And part of the reason why I wrote this book was that my hope is that people can at least learn from some of the mistakes that I've made, some of the positive things that I've done. And my hope is that they go and make new mistakes, ones that
100%.
haven't been made before, right? And then And it was Eleanor Roosevelt who gave that quote. So apologies for that mind lapse for a second.
Amazing. Thank you again for being here. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.